Hello, Pre-Algebra. This video is gonna be reviewing how you do math with fractions. The lesson for Tuesday was looking at fractions and decimals, specifically with word problems. You started looking at those notes and you were just like, whoa, like fractions, word problems, like I don't even remember what a fraction is. This lesson is for you. I'm just gonna drop the word problems for a second and really focus on how you do math with fractions. So I've got an addition problem, a subtraction problem, a multiplication problem, and a division problem, just so you have an example all in one place of how you do each operation. Looking at this first one, we've got 1/2 plus 1/4. Before I even add, I want to just pause and think about what this actually means, what it looks like. You're talking about half of something. So let's say half a pizza. That means you've got a pizza that's divided into two parts, and you have one of those two parts. So that would be something like this. If you have 1/4 of a pizza, that would be a pizza divided into 4 slices. They should be equal slices. I don't know how equal mine are. And it means you've got one of the 4 slices. So something like this. If I'm asking you to add fractions together, adding anything is always just putting it together. So if we're adding these fractions, that's us putting these two amounts together. Now, when you talk about adding fractions, if this actually was pizza, I can't just say 1 plus 1 is 2, because looking at the picture, that's like saying, I have 2 slices of pizza. This isn't 2 slices of pizza. You can't say they're 2 slices of pizza because right now they're different sizes, right? If you had like a huge slice of pizza and a small slice of pizza, we wouldn't say those are the same. Anytime you want to add fractions together, you want these numbers here, which we call the denominator, you want those numbers to be the same. That would mean that, again, if it's pizza, it would mean it's the same size pizza. The way you do that, the way you change these denominators to be the same, is usually we look at the smaller one and see if we can use multiplication to make the smaller one look like the larger one. I notice when I look at the 2, I know my multiplication, so I could say, well, I know 2 times 2 is 4. We could use multiplication to change this fraction to look like this other one by multiplying it by 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. When you go to do that, you're not just multiplying your denominator, you're also multiplying the top number, which we call your numerator. When we do that, 1 times 2 gives you 2, 2 times 2 gives you 4, and now our denominators are the same. Now I want to look at what I just did down here with the picture. When you change 1/2 to 2/4, you are not changing the amount at all, you're just changing what the fraction looks like. It's like saying instead of having a pizza cut into 2 slices and I have one of them, if I were to cut it in 4 slices, now I've got 2 of them. I've got 2 of the 4 slices. I didn't change the amount of pizza I had. I just changed the way the fraction looks. Now we want to do that so that now we can add them together. If you're looking down here at the pizza, I meant to say picture, but I guess pizza. If you're looking down here at the picture, I asked you how many total slices of pizza this is. It's 1, 2, 3. I can't add them together now because now they're all the same size slice pizza. So we could go ahead and say 2 plus 1 is 3. When you go to add your fractions, that denominator stays the same. I have half a pizza. If I'm adding in 1/4 of the pizza, we now have 3 of those 4 slices. The pizza's always been out of 4 slices, so that we're not adding the 4s together. We just now have 3 of the 4 slices. To summarize, when you're going to add fractions together, you need those denominators to be the same. If they are not the same, then you can change one or both of your fractions using multiplication. I chose times 2 because I noticed that you can multiply this denominator 2 by 2 to make it the same as this other one. When we did that, we multiplied both the numerator, the top number, and the denominator, the bottom number, to get 2/4. And then when we added, we only added those top numbers. We only added our numerators together. And then the bottom number, the denominator, stayed the same. Now, everything I just said about changing fractions, about adding, keeping the denominator the same, all of that is also true for subtraction. So what I would like you to do, if you are watching this video, is go ahead, pause the video, and try doing what we just did to help you solve this subtraction problem. And I'm not going anywhere, so I'll wait while you do that. Okay, so hopefully you just paused the video and you tried that. If we wanted to do this subtraction problem here, it would start really the exact same way this one is. I can't subtract them because the denominators are different. So I would want to come in and change this fraction to look like this one, the same exact way we just did, by multiplying by 2. When we do that, we get 2/4 minus 1/4. Now that the denominators are the same, we can go ahead and subtract. We can say 2 minus 1 is 1, and then our denominator of 4 would stay the same, so we get 1/4. If you go back to those pictures I had drawn earlier, we're starting with 1/2, which looks like this. 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4. So all we're doing here is saying instead of calling it 1/2, let's call it 2/4. If you take away 1/4, that's taking away one of these here, which is so easy to do when you have a whiteboard. And you're left with 1/4. You're left with 1 out of those 4 slices. Addition and subtraction when it comes to fractions are really similar. They are not similar to multiplying and dividing fractions. When you're talking about multiplying and dividing fractions, the good news about multiplying and dividing is it does not matter if these denominators are the same or not. We could go ahead and multiply these even though the denominators are different. When you're multiplying a fraction and a fraction, another way to think of this is 1/2 times 1/4 is the same thing as half of 1/4. So if I went back to that picture we had drawn earlier of 1/4, multiplying 1/2 times 1/4 is really finding half of this, which would be something like this. Now, the math that goes with that, when you go to multiply fractions, you're going to multiply going straight across, not cross multiplying, but going straight across. So we could say 1 times 1 is 1. Doesn't matter that these are different. We're going to go ahead and multiply them. We could say 2 times 4 is 8. So we get our answer is 1/8. This picture I had drawn at the beginning, if I continued these lines going across so that all the slices are the same size, which is important when you're talking about fractions, we have 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 1/8. Now I give myself an easier one to draw. When you're drawing half of something, it's a lot easier to put a picture with that. But if I had given you some crazy fraction here, like 3/17, that wouldn't be as easy to draw, but the math, the multiplication would be the same. You're always multiplying straight across for the problem. Now the last one we've got is division. When you are dividing fractions, dividing is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. That is the fancy math way of saying if you want to divide by a fraction, instead of thinking of division, dividing a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. Reciprocal is the math word that means flip the fraction around. So the reciprocal of 1/4, if you flip that fraction, the reciprocal would be 4/1. Dividing a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. We do that, and then afterwards, hey, it's like the same thing we did up there. So we could go ahead and say 1 times 4 is 4, and 2 times 1 is 2. Now this is the first problem where there's something else we can do. Do you know what we could do with this fraction? To get our final answer, we want to do something called simplifying. When you simplify a fraction, simplifying means finding a number that goes into both of these that you can divide both by. It's kind of the opposite of what we did earlier with multiplying. When we were multiplying 1/2 to get 2/4, you're making both these numbers bigger. When you're simplifying, you're making it simpler. That's where simplify comes from. Simpler meaning that the numbers are getting smaller. Now, just like up here, we didn't change the amount, we just changed the numbers, but it represents the same amount. Same thing here with simplifying. So when we simplify this fraction, it's going to be the same amount, just with simpler numbers. When you're looking at 4 and 2, if you want to simplify, you want to think, what's a number you can divide both 4 and 2 by? Hopefully your brain is shouting 2. If we go to simplify, I'm going to divide both of those by 2. 4 divided by 2 gives me 2. 2 divided by 2 gives me 1. So we get this fraction here. Now I've been saying a lot of fractions out loud. This is 1/2, 2/4, 1/8. What is this fraction? 2 1s, 2 firsts. I would probably say this is 2 wholes. Remember when we were talking about fractions, we said that denominator tells you how many parts there are. So you have 1 out of 2 parts. You have 2 out of 4 parts. This means you have 2 wholes. Means you've got 2 whole circles. It wasn't divided up into parts. So instead of saying I have 2 wholes, the simplest way to write this is just 2. If you think back to that first notes we looked at that covered integers and integer operations, those notes we had talked about how this can sometimes mean division. That's another way you can think about it. This is saying 2 divided by 1, which is 2. Also back here, this was saying 4 divided by 2, which is 2. So if going back to that division helps you, you can always do that. This was an example of how you add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. For this last part of the video, I'm going to make up 4 problems for you to try on your own. You want to try them first. Pause the video, try them yourself, and then I'll give you the answers at the very end of the video. So let's do 1/3 plus 1/9. Let's do 5/6 minus 1/3. And then let's do, how about 5/6 times 1/3? And 5/6 divided by 1/3. I got lazy at the end. So go ahead and pause this video, try these 4 problems, and then I'll give you the answers. And pause. I never know what to do with this empty silence. Hopefully you have resumed the video. You have tried these 4. Let me go ahead and give you the answers. For this first one, in order to make these denominators the same, you had to multiply this first fraction by 3. We're choosing 3 because I know 3 times 3 would give me this 9 here. When you do that, instead of 1/3 plus 1/9, it would say 3/9 plus 1/9, which gives you 4/9. You add your numerators, you keep your denominator the same. For the second problem, 5/6 minus 1/3, again, we need those denominators to be the same in order to subtract. I'm going to change my 1/3 by multiplying by 2. I've chosen 2 because I see that 3 times 2 will give me this one, will give me 6. So that changes our problem. Instead of 5/6 minus 1/3, it would be, oh no, 5/6 minus 2/6. Whoopsie, my hand's not listening to my brain. When we go to subtract, 5 minus 2 gives us 3. And then our denominator stays the same, so we get 3/6. I'm sorry if the board is looking crowded right now. 3/6 was not your final answer. I'll put it over here. It's not your final answer because this is one you could simplify. If you didn't simplify it before, if you want to pause and try simplifying it now. Okay. You can simplify by dividing by the number 3. 3 is the number that goes into both of these. When you do that, 3 divided by 3 gives you 1, and 6 divided by 3 gives you 2. So your final answer for that one was 1/2. For this third one, I'm going to go ahead and erase the first two to give us more space. That's better. For this third one, when you go to multiply fractions, remember you're just multiplying straight across. So you should have said 5 over 18, 5/18. Something we didn't say before is how you know if you can simplify or not. So those ones we've been simplifying, there is a number you can divide by. If you tried simplifying something like this, there's no number you can divide both of these by. The only number you could divide both of them by is 1. And if you try dividing by 1, you're just going to get 5/18 again. So because we can't simplify, that kind of confirms that this right here is going to be your final answer. There's one last one, this division one. We had said earlier that dividing a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So in order to do this division problem, I would first change it to a multiplication problem, multiplying by the reciprocal. When we do that, 5 times 3 gives us 15. 6 times 1 gives us 6. I noticed looking at that fraction that we can simplify that one too. What can we divide by? Are you saying 3? If you divide by 3, 15 divided by 3 is 5, and then 6 divided by 3 is 2. So that could be our final answer. Some people also know how to take this a step further. What I'm going to say, it's not necessary, but if you do know how to change this into a mixed fraction, 5/2 is the same thing as 2 and 1/2. If you had written that down as your final answer, you were also correct. Just know that it's not necessary to do this. You can leave it as 5/2. What we're saying by doing that is if you had 5/2, going back to our pictures, this would be 1/2. This would be 2/2. Once that numerator becomes higher than the denominator, it means you have more wholes. So 1/2, 2/2, 3/2, 4/2, 5/2. I have 2 circles and then half a circle. So I have 2 and 1/2. Again, that's not necessary, but that is for the people watching this video who said, wait, what about that thing with mixed numbers? You can write it that way as well. Hopefully this video helps answer any questions you had on how to do math with fractions. Remember, the other half of those notes is on decimals, but in the past I've found those are easier for students. If you just relate everything to money, it kind of helps make the decimals make more sense, whereas fractions, I know a lot of us aren't walking around on the street dividing fractions, so this is your quick refresher on how you do the math. Once you're feeling more confident doing just like the straight addition, subtraction, multiplication, division problems with fractions, go back to some of those word problems, and hopefully you'll find those a little easier. Thanks so much for watching this video. Good luck on the lesson. Don't forget to, if you're just still feeling overwhelmed with how to do math with fractions and decimals, please reach out to Denise or I during our tutoring hours. We would love to help you. Until then, have a nice evening.